The Veitnam War. In the 1800s, the French took over Vietnam for its valuable exports, rice and rubber. Its neighbours Laos and Cambodia joined to make French Indochina. The people of Vietnam didn't like being colonised. A lot of farmers lost their land and grew poor, while the French colonists grew rich. During World War II, a Vietnamese man called Ho Chi Minh organised his Viet Minh armies against the French. Then in 1946, war broke out between the Viet Minh and the French. America's President Harry S. Truman decided to help France. At the time, America was involved in the Cold War with communist countries like the Soviet Union and China. Ho Chi Minh was a communist, and that worried Truman. America believed that if Vietnam became communist, the whole of Asia would too. At first, the US gave France money to help with the war, but it didn't matter. The Viet Minh won victories in the north of the country. In 1954, France and the Viet Minh signed a peace treaty, dividing the country into communist North Vietnam and anti-communist South Vietnam. The government in the south wasn't very popular with its people, so the North Vietnamese used a transportation system called the Ho Chi Minh Trail to send supplies and soldiers to the communist uprising in the south. On August 2nd, 1964, North Vietnamese torpedoes fired on an American ship in the Gulf of Tonkin. President Lyndon Johnson got Congress to pass the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. It said the US could use military force in Vietnam. At first, the force was limited to bombings, but by the end of 1965, there were 184,000 troops in Vietnam and over 500,000 by the end of 1968. At first, everyone thought it would have been an easy fight for the US. The army was much more advanced and included a great navy and air force. Not only that, a lot of battles were fought in the jungle, and the US army was not well equipped. But the Viet Cong, the communist soldiers in the south, fought a guerrilla war. They used small bands of soldiers to stage ambushes and build huge tunnel complexes to hide in even the cities. In the south, where Americans were in control, the Viet Cong would stage suicide bombings and sneak attacks. Back home, the war became very unpopular. People couldn't understand why Americans had to die for a tiny country halfway around the world. Protesters marched against the war, sometimes peacefully, sometimes not. But a lot of Americans believed in the war. They thought that protesters were putting the soldiers in danger by weakening support for them. Eventually, President Johnson stopped sending more troops. He even refused to run for another term as president because of Vietnam. Richard Nixon became president in 1968, promising to end the war with honour, but he didn't manage to make the peace until 1973, after his re-election. By the time the war was over, 1.2 million North and South Vietnamese were dead, and 58,000 American soldiers were killed in conflict. Once the American army pulled out, the North Vietnamese invaded the south and unified the country under communist rule. Today, Vietnam is still mostly communist in its government, although it has shifted to a market economy where businesses and consumers decide what to sell and buy. The US and Vietnam are now friendly with each other and have established major trade deals. Thank you for watching this short documentary. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.